when you are multiplying a whole number times, this little dot here represents times, a whole number times a fraction. In this case, it's a unit fraction because remember, a unit fraction has a 1 in the numerator. So a whole number times a unit fraction, the guy said in the video, you can kind of say, oh, there's like a little imaginary 1 here on the bottom. And that's because you really don't do anything with the denominator, okay? That can get a little bit confusing, but really all I want you to do when you're multiplying a whole number by a fraction, a unit fraction or any fraction that is, you're going to take the big number right here, this big whole number, and you're only going to multiply it by the numerator. So 4 times 1 is 4. And then you're just going to keep the denominator. And let me explain why that is. I don't know if you remember, but at the beginning of our fractions unit, we did something like this with our unit fractions. We said, okay, 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 equals, oh, well, we don't count the denominators, so we're going to count the numerators. 1, 2, 3, 4 thirds. And remember we said, oh, repeated addition is the same thing as multiplication. So this right here, 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 is the same thing as saying 1, 2, 3, 4 times 1/3, okay? So that's why we're only really multiplying the numerator, because when we add, we only add the numerators. We're not ever really going to be doing anything with the denominators. Now I want to point out one other thing. Our answer here, we got 4/3. Now there is something a bit wrong with this fraction. Do you remember why? Remember when I talked about John Cena and how he's very, very, very heavy. And if we have a very heavy number or a higher number on top and the lower number is having to hold it up, it's going to be hard for this number, right? It's called an improper fraction when the numerator is bigger than the denominator. So that's usually not the form that we like you to keep your answer in. Whenever you get this, an improper fraction in your answer, I'm going to write this down, always convert. Always convert it. So how do you convert an improper fraction to a mixed number? That's what you're going to do. Remember we did 4 divided by 3. Or you can think of it as how many times can 3 go into 4? 3 times what goes into 4? You do 3 times 1. Take away 3 and you have 1 left. Okay? So your answer would be, starting here, 1 and 1/3. So what is 4 times 1/3? We turned it into 4/3, but then we had to convert 4/3 to 1 and 1/3. So 1 and 1/3 is our final answer. Now what if you have a whole number times any fraction that's not a unit fraction? For example, what if we have 4 times 5/8? Okay, and in order to do that, that's like basically the same as saying, oh, 4 times 5/8. That is the same as 5/8 plus 5/8 plus 5/8 plus 5/8. It's the same thing. 4 times 5/8 is 5/8 plus 5/8 plus 5/8 plus 5/8. But instead of having to write it all down kind of like this, in this format, it's easy to see, oh, we don't add the denominator, we just add the numerators, 5, 10, 15, 20, 28. Okay, and that's how we would add it, but it's not written as an addition problem over here. I mean, you always can write it as an addition problem, but it's not always going to be the most efficient because it's not super quick, right? So remember, as I said earlier, you're just going to take this whole number and multiply it by the numerator. So 4 times 5 is 20. And then you just keep the denominator, 28. It's a lot faster to do it that way than to write it all out like this. Now, 28, oh, that is a John Cena fraction if I ever saw one. 28 is our answer, but it's not completely the answer. That's not the answer I want you to keep because you need to convert that. All right, so to convert it, again, we're going to do 20 divided by 8. How many times can 8 go into 20? 8 times 1, 8 times 2. 8 times 2 sounds about right. That's going to give us 16, and then we're going to have 4 left over. So our number right here, we're going to start with our whole number is going to be 2. We're going to go around, and 4 eighths. And that will be our final answer. And 2 and 4 eighths, of course, is the same thing as 2 and 1/2. But if you keep 2 and 4 eighths, that is just fine for now. Okay, so 4 times 5 eighths is the same thing as 28, which is 2 and 4 eighths.